The intensity comes from the powerful morning. Good morning. For some, it's already daytime. We have a lot to cover today. There is great news, for example, about the fact that those in power who have stolen and embezzled are being released, and in my opinion, that's just wonderful. But what about ordinary people? Are they facing many more years of war? That's what Budanov said. Before we start, please subscribe to the channel. So let's get going. Look, at the very beginning, I'll show you a video called Better at Home. Do you remember it? Where Ukrainians abroad are shown videos about how good it is at home. The food is tasty, the sun is shining, and people are so kind. And these kind people are dragging their fellow citizens into vans. And in this video, the draft officers are shooting at ordinary citizens. It looks like, well, it's a civil war, nothing else. In the end, the woman, her husband, the man who was taken away, falls to the ground, and these manhunters drive away. You can watch the full video on my channel. There's a lot of disturbing content there, so YouTube doesn't approve of it. Here's the link. Go to the channel by pointing your phone or tablet camera at this QR code. If you're watching me from a tablet or smartphone, there's a direct link to the Telegram channel in the video description. So what about the good news? Do you remember there was a ministry, the Ministry of Unity of Ukraine, when they were planning to unite those inside the country and those outside? So that, like brothers and sisters, everyone would move together in a single impulse for Sani rather than for Frin. It was all called Minid. Sorry, I didn't come up with that. The naming there in Ukraine is just wonderful, like electronic points, e-points, this very Minid. Well, there's a lot more like that. But it sounds even more inappropriate. So when you look at this wonderful person, you immediately feel proud of this patriot from your side. They'll remove the ankle monitor, all restrictions are lifted. Let me remind you, he was accused of taking some money there, and quite a lot too. Well, for example, this construction of beautiful houses for citizens, I mean for the right citizens. So here we have Yermak and Chernisha himself, by the way, he's Zelensky's godfather, and a few other wonderful people. Well, now apparently everything has settled down. As we know, there is no corruption in Ukraine, so the investigating judge decided not to extend the requirement for Oleksiy Chernyshev to wear an Kyiv monitor, and it will be removed soon. I think that's good. But he will still have to report any changes of residence and work, and appear before the detective and the prosecutor. It's all cronies and relatives there too, so I think instead of reporting to him directly, you can just meet at a restaurant. When you start drinking with any of them, you end up reporting with every new shot where you're moving, from which resort to which. Well, look, the interaction between citizens and the state is excellent. It's just a country and a smartphone. A digital state is very good. And then, what else do we have? There's also, if you remember, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Kuleba, who made life difficult for all Ukrainians abroad, well, not all, but for the majority. He banned the issuance of documents like passports abroad, the provision of notary services, and the provision of other services. Now, it seems they've resumed it, but there was nothing good before, and a lot of people sincerely grew to love him. Now, this wonderful person as well, he says that corruption in the country is not a big deal, and he gives as an example such a great country. What do you think? Which country could be used as an example for Ukraine to say, look, in that country everything is great and we will have it the same way? You didn't guess. It's not Switzerland, not France, not even America, and not Israel. It's India. India, Kuleba, well, let me show you a video. Honestly, I don't know what else Kuleba needs to do. To make it even stranger, he and his wife interview each other, talking about all sorts of things. For example, his wife talked about how she owns a store that sells intimate products, and she mentioned that there are some intimate products with heating. So, since it's cold in winter, you can surround yourself with these products and keep warm. And she was saying this completely seriously. Then, this former minister himself talked about how it's not the time to go to restaurants, when he was still a minister before he was fired. He immediately began traveling Western Ukraine, promoting restaurants run by old ladies named Parasoka and praising their delicious Crucian carp with sour cream. And now, India, there are just no words for this. You can only listen. There's a man on the left wearing a hat, a man on the right without a hat, and they're having a nice conversation.
So for example, I look at India, they steal, it's scary. Look, for us, it's such a terrorist level, extraordinary corruption. I mean, I could just list things about the country just so you understand the example. It's really extraordinary.
Kuleba gives a clear example to his fellow citizens.
In a corrupt country from top to bottom, nothing works as it should. The laws are so complex and overregulated that they themselves are just complaining about it. Could we already be like China if we had corrected our mistakes? But nevertheless, a deeply corrupt country today is one of the richest and the northernmost.
One of the richest countries. One of the most influential, honestly, I don't even know where it is. And Pakistan is probably even richer. Afghanistan apparently is leading the world. I don't know who made the lists and ratings for Kuleba, whether he did it himself or someone else. What kind of search engine does he use to find information for the powerful anyway? But if something like this is being given to Zelensky as well, it's no wonder that what's happening is happening, because to use India as an example for Ukraine. Because moreover, they're saying, well, look, we have corruption, but it's not a big deal. They're rich, and it would be one thing if he said it's the USA or France or at the very least Bulgaria, but no, it's India. Yeah, well, okay. I wanted to ask, what are you smoking over there? But I won't ask what you're smoking because I'm not interested. It's already clear enough. Even when I was a kid, for example, if I got a bad grade, not always, but sometimes I would say, well, Masha, Sasha, and Petya got even worse grades. And my parents would say, listen, maybe you should compare yourself to those who did better. Look at what Zora, Goga, and Vasya got. They probably got a 5. I was still studying under the 5-point grading system, strange as it may seem, while they focus on those who get 2s and 3s. And here Kuleba is doing the same thing. So look, Ukraine is in a bad situation, but over there it's even worse, but at least they're rich. Ooh, all of this, let's have a caste system, although why would we want a caste system? We see that a caste system has already existed in Ukraine for several years. Officials, military, who else? We also have ordinary citizens and talking heads. So, we have several castes. Soon there will be Kshatriyas. Well, actually, they already exist too. These are the ones who walk the streets and try to exist, while all those previous castes who rise above us, like various counts and princes, float on the surface of the internet. These people live for their own pleasure, eat delicious food, drink sweet drinks, and sleep wonderfully. But that's why worry? Ukraine is a rich country so that it can become even richer. Budanov, who is now the head of the president's office, is proposing what? He proposes to continue the war for a few more years as well, basically. Well, why not? Drones are being sold, shells are being sold, money is circulating, everything is fine. He talks primarily about Crimea and says that we need to endure and tighten our belts. And what is the main goal? Now you'll be surprised by these people.
Who actually understand that Crimea is Ukraine. It's a single whole, and no one will ever be able to break that bond.
Apparently these people meet in the president's office every day. Such a connection with Crimea cannot be broken because ordinary citizens in Ukraine, the majority, at least 99%, simply don't care. First, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We need to remember that we have physiological needs there, then safety, and only after that come things like self-expression, self-affirmation, and physiological needs. That's eating, drinking, and also protecting yourself from bombs. When drones are flying at you every day, you don't think about Crimea, or when you're being shoved into a van at a checkpoint, you don't think about Crimea either. Who in Ukraine is thinking about Crimea? Well, those who are living very well. And that's literally just a few tenths of a percent of Ukraine's population. And those are probably the ones thinking about Crimea. I mean, maybe some deputies and those close to them.
They need to be a bit more understanding about what's happening. I understand what they see in all of this. Besides successful strikes against the enemy, there are also social problems for them personally related to the lack of gasoline. That's just a fact. The power outages are huge. Water supply is often disrupted. Well, that's mostly a consequence of the electricity shortages, and so on and so on. But all these inconveniences are happening right now, for the sake of a great goal, and that great goal is returning home.
In short, Crimeans, who is watching me? And if your main goal, according to Budanov, is returning home, and home, again, according to Budanov, is Ukraine. So gasoline, electricity, your own needs, all that doesn't matter. The main thing is to think about returning to Ukraine, especially when you remember that this same Ukraine cut off Crimea in 2014. From electricity and water, I mean, if they're coming, we'll bomb them, cut them off from electricity. Cut them off from water, take away their gasoline, and then say, come back home. The highest goal is something with Budanov lately. Well, something like that. Then, do we have anyone else? Do we have anyone else? Do you remember the explosions in Vishnovo? The Vishnovo where those shells detonated, either with depleted uranium or just regular shells. But the explosions were so powerful that half the city was blown apart. About 80 houses almost down to the foundation, destroyed. I literally read the report today. Let me remind you of the video now. All of this, and there, in general, the Ukrainian armed forces made some very interesting statements. I'll show you this now, or okay, I'll add it in later as we go. So, what did they say? They stated that the facility where the detonation occurred does not belong to the Ukrainian armed forces. So, basically, there's some complex of buildings, or maybe just one building, packed to the brim with some kind of ammunition. So powerful that they blew up half of this very Vishnovoye, and no one knows why or what it is. I mean, maybe even the shells belong to the AFU, but the warehouse where they were stored doesn't belong to the AFU. And therefore, according to a representative of these very armed forces, everything is fine, everything is normal. The facility in Vishnovo, where ammunition detonated after Russian shelling, is neither controlled nor managed by the armed forces of Ukraine. Therefore, the order of the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, which prohibits placing ammunition depots and other similar facilities near civilian buildings and places where local residents stay, remains in effect. So, everything is fine? You can take several tons of ammunition, stuff it into some house belonging to Uncle Kolya's neighbor, and then say, well, that's just a pile of shells, but the house belongs to Uncle Kolya. Come on, seriously? I'm just amazed by this logic. Who is this even for? Who is it aimed at? And then he also says that this very representative expresses sincere condolences to the civilians who suffered as a result of the strike on Vishnovoye. This isn't just strange, it's very strange. So what? And about the house in Akrashcha. That very Skelya is a combat brigade where they tortured, abused, and killed recruits. During the investigation, 7 more cases of mobilized soldiers' deaths were discovered. Let me remind you that this very Skelya reports directly to Syrsky, but Syrsky doesn't know, Zelensky doesn't know. Well, something is happening in that brigade, and it just keeps happening. 6 new cases occurred from the end of 2025 to the spring of 2026, and another one is dated July 2025. Journalists note that most of those who died had been in the units for less than a month, and something happened to them right away. Well, it's just a coincidence. They just list the last names and first names of the deceased here, and all that's left for the relatives is to offer condolences. Condolences. A criminal case has now been opened, but it's still unclear how much the prosecutors and everyone else are actually getting involved. But some countries have gotten involved regarding Ukraine, and they can no longer provide it with assistance. That is, looking at how powerfully Volodymyr Alexandrovich is developing flamingos, various other flying devices, and ballistic missiles. Germany, for example, has stated that Ukraine does not need Taurus missiles. And now the Netherlands have followed and stated the following: that it is no longer possible to provide Ukraine with direct military assistance. This was stated by the country's Minister of Defense, Dylan Yesulga-Zigerius. According to Yesulga-Zigerius, she will now call on other countries to help Ukraine. Since the Netherlands themselves have done everything they could, we no longer have any capacity, says Yesulga-Zigerius. We have done a lot. We have reached the limit of our capabilities, she says. According to her, the Netherlands has spent 9 billion euros on military support for Ukraine and has planned an additional 11 billion in expenses. Separately, the country allocated 1 billion for the PRL program, under which European allies pay for the supply of American weapons to Kyiv. Poland has cut its support by 10-fold or even 100-fold, now allocating only a small amount. And suddenly Bulgaria appeared on the horizon, which also stated that it cannot provide military assistance to Ukraine, but is ready to repair equipment. The Prime Minister of this wonderful country stated that his country has exhausted its ability to provide military assistance to Ukraine, but could help with equipment repairs. I'm curious, what were they helping with before? Honestly, I haven't heard that. Well, accepting refugees, of course, and that's great. The country deserves thanks for that. But as for other types of assistance, what could Bulgaria provide? Some horses or carts, 2 arbas and 4 wagons, but that's good, that's wonderful. It's a pity, of course, that this celebration of endless kindness has come to an end. Well, let's take a look at these very powerful leaders. Of course, we've already seen Kuleba with Budanov. No one can outshine them. They're simply at the peak of our gratitude, it seems. But still, someone can try to outdo them. Here we have Tuka, who dances the Tuka dance. He hasn't been around for a while, and he's talking about victories. About victories, victories, about victories. It didn't work out. Yeah, it didn't happen. No luck, but there are others who succeed and get lucky. Here, for example, Anna Hopko or Hopko. She usually sits in her pajamas in the kitchen with a cup, but right now she's somewhere else. Maybe she moved to the living room. Maybe it's some kind of migration for her, forced refuge in the common room. But she also says that Europe should send troops to Ukraine. Why and for what reason? Well, let's listen to Anna Gobko.
With Trump, Ukraine will not move toward NATO membership because Trump has shown his pro-Russian stance. Trump will not change his position. The only thing holding him back, as they say, from increasing pressure on us is American society, whose support for Ukraine is still high.
Yes, I haven't heard that the support of American society was really that high. High for Ukraine, but maybe Anna Hopko, of course, understands geopolitical trends very well, including social trends in other countries.
We need to tell Europe to help Ukraine win, including sending troops and humanitarian aid.
I don't know what she's planning to explain to Europe. One strong leader has already stated that if suddenly some minister from another country insults Zelensky, then suddenly someone from the Ukrainian military will come to that person. Seriously, online, that's what was stated. Well, as for how Anna Hopko is going to convince other people abroad, I have different thoughts about that. Of course, then there's this character who looks like some characters from Star Wars. And at one time, he was the author of a bill to ban the collection. I wanted to say fallen branches, but no, firewood above a certain volume. And some old man even got fined for keeping an extra tree stump in his yard. So what is this Kamalchuk thinking with? Yura, well, I think we all understand, right?
And Poland can be grateful to us for the late 80s and early 90s when we saved their behinds because they had nothing. Are Poles jealous of Ukrainians? Yes, they are. Well...
No comments here. Honestly, I don't even know what that was about. What did Ukraine save in Poland in the 80s and 90s? Ukraine saved them. Man, there was poverty in Ukraine. Who could it have saved? What's going on? Back then, people were just trying to survive. I don't know what kind of weirdness this is. Don't ask. No comments here. So what? And let's take a look at this character right now. He's saying that Konstantinovka was not captured under any circumstances. Some kind of hero from somewhere. Apparently some kind of super soldier again. Young Lenin stopped pretending to be young Elton John, but now his form factor is kind of a hybrid symbiont, so to speak.
It's just part of cognitive warfare, so this isn't surprising. I can now responsibly state that the Russians' positions in Kostiantynivka are uncertain, and partly on the ruins of Kostiantynivka, Russians with flags are appearing. They're showing this to the world, but mainly to their own people to signal victory. It's hard to say what they're counting on, but most likely they're just showing that their movement is relentless. I repeat, our task is to hold them back.
Look at the watch young Lenin has, it's just wonderful. The desire to control everything and everyone through time tracking and the management of various organizational processes is wonderful and extremely important. As old Lenin would say, and as for the guy in the cap, he said what he said, so I suggest we turn him off. He has played his part. We all did a good job too. Be sure to write in the comments what you think about this. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Goodbye, everyone.
If we had closed the economy, we would have cut off their funds. They have VPNs working there. Yes, they have access to the internet, but they're under pressure. They're slowly tightening the screws, gradually turning it into North Korea. But, as they say, a Russian revolt is frightening because of its bloodshed. And, they take a long time to get ready, but then they move fast. That's also possible, and we need to create these conditions. And what does the enemy do? First of all, the enemy's actions against them are not a response. It's pressure on a society that's tired of the war.